Anne Heche's story is one of resilience, reinvention, and raw courage, a tale of a woman who faced unimaginable pain, defied the odds, and rose to shine in the unforgiving spotlight of Hollywood. Born on May 25, 1969, in Aurora, Ohio, Anne's early life was anything but easy. Behind her bright blue eyes and warm smile was a childhood filled with secrets, struggles, and emotional wounds that most people could not imagine surviving. Her family was constantly on the move, chasing dreams that rarely came true. Her father, a man of charm but instability, left behind a legacy of confusion and heartbreak. When Anne was just 13, tragedy struck. Her father died of AIDS, a loss that shattered her young world and exposed the deep fractures within her family. To make matters worse, Anne's brother died in a car accident just months later, and her mother, unable to cope, turned to religion and denial as a shield against reality. These early traumas could have easily broken her spirit, but instead, they forged in her a strength that would later become the backbone of her remarkable career. As a teenager, Anne knew she wanted something more than pain, she wanted purpose. Acting became her escape, her language, her therapy. When most kids her age were figuring out who they were, Anne was already auditioning, memorizing lines, and dreaming of a stage where she could become anyone but herself. At 16, she was discovered by a talent scout while performing in a school play, and before she even graduated, she landed her first big role in the soap opera Another World. This was the start of something extraordinary. Anne wasn't just talented, she was electric. Her performances carried a depth and authenticity that could only come from someone who had truly lived through darkness. Within months, she was winning awards, earning acclaim, and showing the world that she was more than just another actress, she was a force. But fame didn't come without its shadows. The entertainment industry, with all its glamour, also tested her resilience. Anne Heche entered Hollywood at a time when it was not kind to authenticity. The pressures to conform, to hide parts of herself, to fit into a mold were overwhelming. Yet Anne refused to be silenced. In 1997, when she publicly confirmed her relationship with Ellen DeGeneres, she did something that few actresses dared to do at the time, she chose honesty over image. The decision cost her dearly. Major studios turned their backs on her, contracts were cancelled, and opportunities evaporated overnight. For simply being herself, Anne was ostracized by the very industry she had worked her whole life to conquer. But instead of breaking down, she broke through. She spoke openly about her experiences, her struggles with identity, and her search for truth. It was an act of bravery that would later make her a symbol of courage for countless people who felt unseen or unheard. As Anne's name began echoing through Hollywood, she faced a choice that few ever dared to make, to protect her image or protect her truth. She chose truth, even when it hurt. While most stars in the late 90s crafted carefully sanitized versions of themselves, and walked onto red carpets unapologetically authentic, her head held high even when whispers followed her every move. She had stepped into the spotlight as both an actress and a human being who refused to hide who she was. That decision came with a heavy price. Roles were withdrawn, invitations rescinded, and tabloids painted her as difficult or unstable. Yet Anne never allowed public perception to define her inner worth. Instead, she poured her heart into her work, finding refuge in storytelling, where she could express what words alone could not capture. After 6 days, 7 nights, many assumed her career would continue to soar without interruption, but Hollywood can be merciless, especially toward women who refuse to play by its rules. When doors began closing, Anne looked inward, searching for a new kind of purpose. She turned toward theater, where the intimacy of live performance allowed her to reconnect with her creative core. On stage, there were no cameras, no tabloid headlines, just truth, vulnerability, and raw emotion. She began earning acclaim for her stage performances, winning over audiences with her honesty and depth. Each role became more than a job, it was therapy, a chance to rebuild her identity piece by piece. At the same time, Anne began to explore her voice as a writer and director. The woman who had been told so many times what she could or could not be decided that she would no longer ask permission. She wrote stories that reflected her own struggles, the pain of isolation, the hunger for love, the courage to defy judgment. These weren't just creative projects, they were reflections of a soul in constant evolution. Through this process, Anne discovered something profound. Her greatest strength was not in being understood by everyone, it was in daring to express herself even when she wasn't. Her 2001 memoir, Call Me Crazy, was a groundbreaking act of self-liberation. In it, Anne opened up about her traumatic childhood, her experiences with abuse, her complex relationship with faith, and her struggles with mental health. It was raw, shocking, and brutally honest. Many in the media mocked her, but those who had lived through pain saw her as a warrior. In a time when conversations about trauma and mental illness were still taboo, Anne became a voice for those who had none. She taught that healing isn't linear, it's messy, painful, and filled with setbacks, but it's worth fighting for. She once said, "I think my mission in life is to remind people that they can find joy after pain." That quote became a guiding light for countless people who had been silenced by their own shame. Despite the fame and success she later achieved, Anne Heche's early years were marked by extraordinary hardship. Born into a family plagued by instability and secrets, she endured a childhood that few could have survived. Poverty was constant, and tragedy seemed to follow her like a shadow. Yet, within that chaos, Anne developed something rare, an unbreakable resilience and a belief that no matter how dark the world became, light could be created from within. From a very young age, she dreamed of escaping her pain through storytelling, of turning her suffering into art that could touch others. And that dream would become both her salvation and her purpose. When she began acting in high school plays, teachers and classmates quickly noticed something magnetic about her, an intensity that felt real, raw, and deeply human. That was the power of Anne Heche. She didn't just act, she lived every role as if her own soul was on fire. Her journey to Hollywood wasn't smooth. She faced rejection after rejection, was told she wasn't pretty enough, famous enough, or normal enough. But Anne had something many didn't, courage to be authentic in a world that worshipped perfection. Her breakout role came on the soap opera Another World, where she played dual roles, good and evil twins, with such emotional precision that she won a Daytime Emmy. It was more than a performance, it was a message to the world that she was unstoppable. From there, she leapt into Hollywood films like Donnie Brasco, 6 Days, 7 Nights, and Wag the Dog, holding her own alongside legends like Al Pacino and Harrison Ford. But what made her story powerful wasn't just her success, it was the cost of that success. Hollywood adored her talent but struggled with her truth. Anne was one of the few actresses in the 1990s brave enough to openly live her authentic life, even when it meant risking her career. When she publicly dated Ellen DeGeneres, it was a time when such honesty could end careers overnight. And for Anne, it nearly did. She was blacklisted, judged, and ridiculed by an industry that couldn't accept her authenticity. Yet, she never apologized for being herself. Instead, she turned her pain into purpose, writing, directing, and creating projects that reflected resilience, love, and self-acceptance. In interviews, she often said she wanted to show people that no matter what happened to you in life, you could still choose to rise. But behind the scenes, Anne's battles didn't end. She struggled with mental health, loss, and a constant search for peace. Still, she never allowed her suffering to define her legacy. Instead, she used it to remind others that healing is messy, growth is painful, and authenticity often comes with scars. Her memoir, Call Me Crazy, wasn't a confession, it was a declaration that even in brokenness, there is beauty. She showed the world that being human is about embracing every part of yourself, the strong, the fragile, the fierce, and the flawed. As the years passed, Anne Heche became more than an actress, she became a symbol of resilience in the face of relentless adversity. The Hollywood spotlight had both elevated and wounded her, but Anne refused to disappear quietly. Even as the industry distanced itself from her, she reinvented herself, not once, but over and over again. When others would have surrendered to bitterness, and turned inward, seeking strength through expression. She began to write scripts, direct films, and create art that came straight from her heart. She once said, "I want to use my voice to tell stories that matter, stories that can help people heal the way I had to heal." That wasn't just a quote. It was her mission. Anne's resilience was astonishing because it came from pain most people would have never survived. Her childhood was marked by trauma, a father who lived a double life, a family fractured by loss, and a struggle for stability that seemed endless. Yet, instead of letting that pain harden her, she transformed it into compassion. Those who worked with her often said she had a light, unpredictable, fiery, and deeply empathetic. On film sets, she was known for her professionalism, but also for her laughter. Even after years of being misunderstood, she radiated hope. She believed that no person was ever too broken to begin again. Her career evolved in surprising ways. After 6 days, 7 nights, many expected her to become a conventional Hollywood star. But Anne wasn't built for convention. She wanted art that reflected truth. She performed in indie films, wrote her own projects, and explored roles that terrified her, not because of fame, but because of depth. Every character she played carried echoes of her own life, a woman fighting, surviving, and rising again. In films like Birth and Cedar Rapids, she reminded audiences of her stunning range. Critics began to re-evaluate her legacy, realizing that her bravery had paved the way for future artists to live openly and authentically. But Anne's story is not just professional, it's deeply spiritual. After facing ostracism, she embarked on a profound journey of self-discovery. She explored therapy, spirituality, and creative healing. She spoke about meeting herself again after years of trying to be what others demanded. In one interview, she said, "The hardest thing in the world is to keep believing in your worth when the world tells you otherwise. But I did. And that belief saved me." That raw honesty became her signature. She never pretended to be perfect, she was perfectly human. What made Anne extraordinary was that she never stopped fighting for love. Despite heartbreaks and losses, she believed in connection. She was a devoted mother, and her sons were her pride. She often described them as her reason to keep going, her proof that life could begin anew, no matter the past.